Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Rolande Hodel, and I will be your presenter tonight. I'm thanking the Westchester Chemical Society for inviting me to give this talk. The Westchester Chemical Society is a subsection of the American Chemical Society. The talk is titled Advocating for Pharmaceutical Drug Production in Africa. This is basically a recap of the 20 years I've spent in West Africa and an outlook for the future, what the organization tries to accomplish in the next 30 years. When you have a nonprofit organization like AIDSfreeAFRICA, we are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we were founded in 2005. Our mission is to empower Africans to produce and access quality-controlled pharmaceutical drugs. The mission is really a wonderful thing because when you get lost in all this work and all the things that happen, you go back to your mission and you ask yourself, what is it we're doing? As long as you stay with your mission, you're fine. And I'm going to show you this throughout this talk. So the mission is always accompanied by the vision. The vision of AIDSfreeAFRICA is Africa free of HIV/AIDS. Providing the world with the capacity to produce life-saving drugs is an expression of our commitment to peace, health, and human dignity. A nonprofit organization has a board of directors. We are, by our bylaws, 5. Right now we're 4. We're looking for a 5th for a new board member. We have here myself, Dr. Elliot Bay, who is the co-founder and the treasurer. We have Dr. Maimuna. She is a medical doctor and is from Ghana. She lives in Virginia. And we have Caitlin Stebbins, who is our youngest member, and she is in a MD PhD program, also in Virginia right now. We have 2 employees, 4 board members, over 100 volunteers, around 600 donors. And I always hit the ceiling with the Facebook friends. If you don't know, the maximum is 5,000. So we started out in Kenya. And when I founded AIDSfreeAFRICA, I asked people, I said, I want to go to Africa and help Africans to produce drugs locally. Do you know anyone? Where can I go? Can you connect me with someone? I was connected to Kenya first, and I went there, and I got a wonderful education about HIV/AIDS in Africa, which is very different than what we experience here in the United States. But in terms of drug production, there was nothing coming. People were kind of like, oh, doctor, just do your thing. So I flew on my next leg to Cameroon, which is this little red triangle here on the West African coast. We are situated east of Nigeria, west of the Congo, and this above here is Chad. In the south at the equator is Gabon. And Cameroon is a wonderful country. It's about as big as California, with 24 million people. So I told you all of this already. The capital is Yaoundé. Export is hydroelectricity, agricultural products, rubber, palm oil, iron, crude oil, gas, diamonds. So there is, quite something, but it is one of the poorest countries on the planet. So drug production. When I was in Cameroon, I was fortunate that the person who received me, which is Dr. Achu, he understood very quickly what I was up to. And he introduced me to the people from Kakwa Biofarm who were trying to produce malaria drugs. And I visited the factory, and from there I was introduced to all these people. This here is a guy from Meditech. Actually, the 2 here on my right-hand side they wanted to start Meditech. There's Dr. Giselle Tam, And these two gentlemen are from the Cameroonian Baptist Convention. So what happened? Dr. Giselle Etam is our star by far. She was producing a little bit and liquid-based drugs, especially syrups for children. I found over the years that it is easier for companies in Cameroon to produce liquids as compared to solid tablet drugs. And that actually people are rather prefer injectables. They either inject it directly into the patient or via IV fluids. So producing IV fluids is also very important. Dr. Etame has about 5% of the market in Cameroon, which is substantial. Our only little beef with her is that she has no time to get into GMP. GMP is good manufacturing procedures. That's how the international standard is set for producing quality pharmaceuticals. That doesn't mean her pharmaceuticals have no quality. It just means that she's kind of like too busy to do certain things that we wish she would do. I told you fluids is the thing. This big vessel on the left is to produce IV fluids. IV fluids are used in Cameroon a lot. First of all, diarrhea, especially in children, is a big deal. You need fluids. People dehydrate. It is very hot. The Cameroon Baptist Convention is a huge operation run by the church. And they have about 178 hospitals in 2 of the Cameroonian regions. Cameroon has 10 regions. In 2 of the regions, which is the English-speaking part of the country, the Baptists are running hospitals, and they're huge hospitals. They're really big hospitals. So I encourage the production guys to calculate the value of the products that they're producing and feeding into the pharmacies of the Cameroonian Baptist Convention. Because they did it and nobody was really paying attention to them. And when they needed a big truck to, move goods around, they were kind of like, oh, doctor, buy us a truck. I said, you're producing so much value for the CBC. Go to them and get your truck. So this here is the first full-fledged GMP approved pharmaceutical company. They are produced about 40 formulations, which means a lot of them are the same drugs, just in different quantities or in different concentrations. So you cannot equate 40 formulations with 40 different drugs. They did kind of the standard, paracetamol, which is Tylenol, and all sorts of antibiotics and painkillers and malaria drugs. The company was GMP. It was fully accredited, and it was running for a while. I gave them about 5 years because they were sort of settling on the big blockbuster drugs that people use the most. But these were also the drugs that were actually in the country, because people who import drugs from the outside, they're also focusing on these big ticket items. And the profit margin was not that big. And I kept telling them, I said, produce something, pick something that is not already in the country and something that gives you a better profit margin. You're going to run out of money. And sure enough, I thought they would manage for 5 years. They collapsed after 2.5. And the major reason is really money. The other problem is that in Cameroon, there is no backup. There is no infrastructure. If a machine broke down, they had to fly in a specialist from Egypt. That is expensive. This one here is the gentleman on my side is Kenneth Muko. He is young. I think he wasn't even 30 at that time. There were 3 of them, Kenneth, Bernard, and Wilson. They built this building and called it Diamond Pharmaceuticals. They had big plans, and I worked with them for 3 years. We were really trying hard to get this factory starting. But eventually, these 3 guys realized what they were up against. And when Wilson realized he couldn't just come and sit in his office and put his feet on the table, this is how he described it to me, and watch the production running off, the drugs popping out, they kind of gave up. So this building It's still sitting there. Has never been used, which is unfortunate. So Kakwa Biopharm was a company that was producing malaria drugs, which are very, very important. But they were stopped in the production by WHO. I kind of forgot what exactly the complaint was. And at the end, they ended up in court. The US-based investors were fighting with the Cameroonian-based engineers who run the plant. So unfortunately, the whole plant just collapsed and nothing came of it, which is unfortunate. There was a huge value in there. Meditech was the most interesting ones. These guys just came and said, oh, there has to be money in drug production. They told me they raised $2 million, and I thought $2 million. Well, they raised $2 million CFA, that's the Cameroonian money, which is about $4,000. And then they gave up. So, and then there was not too much after this. So the pharmaceutical production it wasn't taking up too much of my time, really, although this was our main focus. So we added eventually drug access, because our mission is really to produce the drugs in Cameroon by the Cameroonians for the Cameroonians, right? So we were not really initially focused on helping to bring drugs from the outside into the country. But the lack of drugs is so huge. You have to imagine if there's a cholera outbreak, and that's a normal thing over there, you have a cholera outbreak, the first 50 people get treated, and then they have no more antibiotics, and then the rest of them has just sort of like figure out how to survive this without medication. So it's dire. I never fly over there without my cholera medicine in my pocket, which I then have to fight with my doctor or my insurance to get it, because they say, you don't have cholera right now, come back when you have it. I'm kind of like, when I have it, I'm in Cameroon, so it doesn't help. But in any case, so one day someone called me and said, Doctor, do you know that Cameroon has $230 million in the Global Fund sitting that they're not using? It's dedicated for them, but they're not using it. And he said, I wrote your reprogramming request. That's what you need. So, okay, fine. So I took it, and with the help of the Prime Minister of Cameroon, Philemon Yang, he connected me to these lovely people, the Minister of Public Health, Secretary General of Public Health, all sorts of government officials in all sorts of departments, people from the Global Fund. It took us 2 years, but we got $80 million worth of AIDS drugs from the Global Fund that Cameroon would have otherwise not gotten. And as always, drugs are lacking up and down. The other thing that we were known for really all over the country, and also our donors loved the clinic in Isu. Isu is a village. If you look at the GPS, there is no road going from Wum to Isu. This is a village, and it's not small. They have some 30 to 40,000 people. They don't even know how many people there are. But it is huge. They had, at that time, one small little government office, which they called the hospital. There was one nurse there. She had a box of condoms and a scale and some papers to write on, and that was that. So we brought drugs from Bamenda to Isu, and we helped one Cameroonian to build the small hospital. And then we found Dr. Ildiko from Romania, who volunteered as a medical doctor. And she was wonderful. I was kind of like, why would someone from the poorest country in Europe come to Africa and help? But she was great because she was used to that level of being poor. And, the way that you have to treat patients, because in Cameroon, you cannot wait for the diagnosis. If someone comes to you and you kind of know they have malaria, you just, treat them before the diagnosis comes in. And you see me here sitting next to this lady. She is the Queen Mother. Madame insisted that I be there she actually wanted to be treated by me because, I could never explain enough that I'm not a medical doctor. So, and this gentleman here is the actual attendant, and he was talking to her. Besides, I couldn't even understand her. She spoke only Iso language. Cameroon has 270 distinct tribal languages, and people in the villages, especially the elderly, that's what they speak. They don't know English or French. So, with the drug access program, what we do is we were buying drugs. We were bringing them in from the US, from Europe. At some point when Sinpharm was producing, we got them in Douala in Cameroon and gave them to the hospitals. And to create sort of a sustainability, we charged these hospitals the amount of money it took us to buy these drugs. So they were able to keep the profits, treat their patients, keep the profit, use it to pay their nurses, pay rent, pay everything they need to pay. And this gentleman here, John, who owns this little clinic, he was able over the years to build a second clinic. They're not big hospitals, but there are essential community, we would probably call them urgent care units. And they are very grateful for the support. Eventually, when you live in Cameroon, of course, you get malaria. That's something that you can't avoid, really. And I watched this whole thing, and this bubble here on the left lower corner, where you have the person and the separation, and then the mosquitoes on the other side. I found out that Cameroonians don't really understand that a mosquito has to bite a person with malaria, pick up the plasmodium, to be able to transfer to the next patient who doesn't have malaria. So I kept talking to people and explaining to them that they have to separate the malaria mosquitoes from, or the malaria sick people from, from the mosquitoes, so not to infect the mosquitoes. And one of the chief of one of the hospitals in Isu, he was kind of like, yeah, doctor, the mother brings the child with diarrhea to the hospital and carries it home with malaria. I said, that's exactly it. So we train people to make window screens to help keep the mosquitoes out of the room and out of the hospital. Another program we run is we eventually got people that donate us in kind. They donate us very useful things, and we would ship them to Cameroon and give it to women to sell, to do a business with, and to create jobs. We figured it is really not helpful to just give them money or just to, give them something. You have to create jobs. Sustainability is a big part of what we're doing. So during the pandemic, during COVID, Cameroon, by the way, is one of the countries who never had COVID. A lot of the African countries never got COVID. And the other ones dealt with it pretty good because they're used to, Ebola and all sorts of dengue fever and monkeypox, all that good stuff. So our donors were very generous, and we were a little bit limited in what we were able to do at that time. So we decided to build a community center. I'm getting older. I figured I want to leave something behind that they can use to run their programs, to do their things. And when I come and visit, I have my own little room up there in the corner, and I can enjoy the view from the top of the community center. This is me on top of the community center. Behind me is one of the mountains that's in front of Mount Cameroon. And from the other side, you see the ocean. I'm actually 15 minutes on foot away from the ocean. When you look down from the community center, you see these 3 apartments. I built them to have local people live with me at the site for security, to secure the buildings, to afford some security to me when I'm there, and to help, run this community center. The goal was to bring Americans over as volunteers to run the programs, because I'm too busy to be there and run programs all the time. But the political situation is very unstable. There is fighting going on, so we cannot allow Americans to come over at this point. We put in the electricity, and we want to build something like this, a water tap, to have drinkable water. This water, I can drink it straight from the faucet. I wouldn't recommend it if someone comes newly from America. They still wouldn't. So Cameroon is very beautiful. It's green and luscious, as you can see here. The ocean is very close. This little one is Rolande Cecile, one of my 5 children that I look after. And she's quite much bigger there. Down there, you see that little tennis ball. I bring these used up tennis balls, and the kids in the evening, they come running and they're kind of like, Doctor, tennis, give us tennis. They love these little balls. This is I basically live, this is the ocean, right? It's the beach. There's the mountain, and I live in between those. So I either look at the mountain or I look at the beach. It is very beautiful. So let's come to our title. What's advocacy? Advocacy comes from Latin word that means call to one's aid. Advocacy refers to the act of providing support with the goal of promoting certain issues and making a change in one's life. To achieve this goal, strong people or advocates speak out on someone else's behalf. They help others tackle their adverse experiences, as well as raising and influencing public awareness. They also create ways on how these people can speak out to influence outcomes. So we've been in Cameroon for 20 years. The goal right now is for the next 20 years to advocate for drug production, not only in Cameroon, and not really to stand there and bring production equipment or, glassware or whatever, but to talk to people, to the people who have the power to make decisions, and bring the people that are already on board, that have a same vision, to bring us all together to really make a push. COVID helped because even here in the US, there were drugs that were not available, and people were kind of like, oh, wow, it's possible that, we can't have the medicine we need. And we are saying, yes, look at Africa. Africa is a continent with 1.2 billion people, and every single tablet has to be imported. And this into a continent with very weak infrastructure, very weak roads, a lot of borders, a lot of customs, and a lot of trouble. So this lady here, Professor Margaret, is a professor in Lagos, and she was saying Africa must begin to produce medicines for Africa with raw materials produced in Africa, she said. There's a big risk in relying on elaborate global supply chains in which the supply of many essential and critical drugs is dependent on overseas suppliers. We have the wherewith to build the local pharmaceutical industry, and we have the hands. We can take it from the bench to the bedside. I wholeheartedly agree with her. It is fascinating, and I want to point out that she goes the extra step and says even the raw materials should be produced in Africa. Yes, perfectly, that would be great. Right now, I would settle for getting the active ingredient and import it and then, formulate the drug and get it out to the hospitals. Recent developments, for example, in South Africa, Novo Nordisk aims to produce insulin in South Africa, along with a partner to treat diabetes across the African continent, it said on recently. The Danish pharmaceutical giant said it would work with Aspen Care in South Africa to produce 60 million vials next year, which could treat 1.1 million people annually. Keep in mind, these are predictions and these are wishes, most of them. And by next year, I would be very skeptical. But it is good that they have this goal. And we as advocates want to push along and say, you promised it. Where are you? What are you doing? What are the holdups? What is it you need to make good on your promise? By 2026, Novo Nordisk plans to treat 4.1 million people living with type 1 and type 2 diabetes across the African continent. By the way, diabetes is a huge problem in Cameroon. I know my friends, when they get diagnosed with diabetes, within 6 years they die because they cannot get their hands on insulin. It's something that needs to be refrigerated. So it's not only the lack of the drug, but the lack of refrigeration, electricity, the refrigerators, and so on. So Novo Nordisk is promising a ceiling price of $3 per vial. That wouldn't be bad. Around 24 million adults currently live with diabetes in Africa. That is a huge number. Strides is one of the companies from India that has for years been talking about producing drugs in Africa. They are right now in Kenya, and they did start production. The company is called Universal Corporation, and it has become the first manufacturer to gain WHO pre-qualification to produce a malaria product. Like I said before, malaria drugs are very important. One thing you have to keep in mind is when you go to the website of the Kenyan-based Strides outfit and watch the video, everyone in this video is either Indian or white people. There are actually no Africans. There are no black people in this video, which is a little bit disturbing. At least they have the goal to sell these drugs in Africa, because believe it or not, there is a big pharmaceutical company, and that one has existed for a long time. It's on the stock market, Aspen Pharmacare. They produce drugs in South Africa for the foreign market. And foreign market means foreign to South Africa. So they're producing drugs in South Africa and exported, I know, a good portion to Latin America. So we definitely want these productions to be in the hands of Africans, to belong to the people, and to produce for the people. The recent developments in Ethiopia, there is an outfit that is sort of like an incubator. Someone built a 279 hectares facility. That's about 500 football fields, if that makes any sense. It is located close to Addis Ababa and the international airport. So it's an incubator where they want to attract startup pharmaceuticals. They say that they have space for over 1,000 factories. So it has to be a huge undertaking. But again, this is something they say they want to do. The question becomes, is it going to be reality, and when? Someone we would like to talk to is the African Union Development Agency. They had a conference in Ghana where actually the West African countries have written a blueprint for production. That was in 2007, so just 2 years after we started. And they met again 10 years later, which is a huge time gap, and, talked about producing drugs. Now in 2022, they had another meeting in Ghana to discuss the African Medicine Regulatory Harmonization Program, which are all good steps, but we are still quite a ways away from drug production. So when you advocate for something, you really want to know what you're advocating for. There is a recent development that you might be familiar with PrEP. We're coming back to HIV/AIDS. Full circle. PrEP is a pre-exposure prophylaxis. I call it the birth control pill of HIV/AIDS. If you're not HIV/AIDS positive and you take this pill, you will not get HIV/AIDS positive. So it prevents infection. Imagine for years we invented drugs that treated people, that kept them alive, that did not get rid of HIV/AIDS, but it made people not die. So we actually created something where more and more people got infected and less people died. So there were, at the end, more and more people on HIV/AIDS drugs. And people were wondering how, where this is going to end up. So PrEP is really the first intervention that cuts down the number of new infections, which is something we worked for 30, almost 40 years. So PrEP in the US really had a big impact. PrEP in Africa is not very useful because you have to take a pill every day. You have to be monitored. And most of the time, the women want to take these drugs because they are more affected by it. And the structure in a lot of African countries is such that women cannot just go to the doctor and get a drug. They basically have to have the agreement of the husband. And they don't have spaces in the house to successfully hide them from them. So it's not really practical. But science invented a new drug. And this drug is a capsid inhibitor. A capsid inhibitor is also a new mode of attack. If you look at this HIV/AIDS virus, you have your outer protein layer, the envelope, which we have drugs to destroy this envelope and make the HIV/AIDS drug go dead before it can do too much bad. But this HIV/AIDS virus is basically still in the bloodstream. It wants to go over here into the white blood cell. It wants to go into the nucleus and take over the production of the RNA and to make new viruses, which then develop and come out of the thing, go back in the bloodstream and attack another white blood cell. By the way, in this whole process, they're destroying the white blood cell. That's why HIV/AIDS patients get their CD4 count and it drops. So, but the next layer in an AIDS virus is this one here, which is the capsid, which is another protein layer. But if you bust this one, you're going to get this RNA to spill out. It spills out into the bloodstream. Once it's in the bloodstream, it is dead. It cannot do anything. Outside, being in the nucleus, it has no surviving chance. So someone got this X-ray crystal structure, this capsid. It looks like a little veg. And when you bust this open, you get to the RNA. When you destroy this one, the virus is dead. So we invented a drug that does exactly that. It destroys that capsid. And once this is destroyed, you are the RNA is absolutely useless. It's not doing anything. So the drug is lenacapavir. It is used in the United States and in Europe, which is really great because Africans have gotten tired of being the guinea pigs and they want new drugs to be used in Europe and in America before they even try them because they got, burned a few times. So all of this happened, and then a trial was held in South Africa, and lo and behold, It prevented HIV/AIDS infection on 100% level. The women who were in this clinical trial, and they like to use women because the women in Africa are just so much more. It's 2/3 of women compared to the 1/3 of men that get infected. There are reasons for that, which I don't want to get into right now. But the fact that this is 100% is just amazing. There is right now a trial in South Africa with men, and we expect the results this coming spring. And when, and we assume it will be the same result, this drug the African countries can start, requesting the drug. So the other advantage of this drug is it's a liquid. Remember, I told you before, Africans it is much easier to produce liquids. They are then entombed in a little vial. You have a glass vial and it gets closed off. So there's no air coming in and out. There's no, there is no, the destruction of the drug because it gets destroyed by oxygen is not a big factor, and it is quite temperature stable. So this drug is injected into people actually subcutaneously. That means like in the belly, like you would inject your insulin, twice a year. In Africa, women in general prefer their birth control be given as injections. So they go every 3 months to the hospital or to the doctor, they get their injection, they get their birth control. So, you get your birth control, you get your antiretroviral prevention drug. So there are certain infrastructures already in place that would help the distribution of that drug. So we would like to have that drug produced in Africa, on the continent. The drug right now costs $42,000 in the United States for one patient for 1 year. So 2 little injections cost $40,000. Yes, you can have a whole discussion on our health insurance system. But in Africa, right now, it's supposed to cost $100 for a patient a year, which is way out of bounds for most Africans. And Professor Joe Fortunac from Howard University, whom I call my East African twin, because we are the 2 people in the world that are in Africa saying they have to produce their own drugs. And Joe Fortunac is working over there on the same goal. And he wrote recently, he participated in the AIDS conference in Germany, saying, well, we can do this, and it would bring down the cost from $100 to $40. And I wrote him back and I said, what if we produce it in Africa? How much is it then? $20? $10? How much can we get this drug? So I'm excited about it. It is a worthwhile goal to spend the rest of my life, which I decided is another 30 years, and to get this drug produced in Africa. Yeah. So I thank you for your patience. I thank you for listening, and feel free to write me. Go to the website or Google my name. You can find me easily, and tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what you can contribute. Thank you so much.